so I can record the meeting. So you'll be on YouTube
Oh, nice.
eventually, so.
Is that a beer?
Pardon? No,
Is that a Corona beer? Is
No.
that Corona beer?
no, that's
I
some
know, I'm just
sparkling
joking.
water.
I'm just joking.
So we shall see what's going on. So let me see. I got to read some of my little controls here. So, well, there it is. So looks like we got 12 of you in here. So I'll wait a couple of minutes. But if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. So
How are you going to disperse like the homework type thing? What are you going to do in that? Are you still working that out?
I'm going to be posting most of it to Canvas, but I'll also be sending some emails because.
So that's the question that I had for you. So like when I went into my Canvas, I can't find your class.
Okay. Well, that's why I'm going to be sending some of these things out to email, at least for the
Email's
time
better.
being.
Okay.
So that we have more than one way, and I'm trying to get phone numbers. I used to get all the phone numbers, but some of the people I have found when I send them an email, the email gets kicked out because I guess it's on a terrorist watch list or something. So.
I've gotten all yours. So
Okay, yeah, most people have, but I've got about 4 or 5 of them that don't seem to be going through, and they get kicked out back in my email and said that they're undelivered. So we'll hopefully get that straightened out. And I am just checking a couple things here on my stuff. Oh, there we go. We can close that. So let me see, how many people do we have in here right now? Looks like there's 12 of you. So thank you for the 12. You guys could be a jury. Hopefully I won't get convicted of anything.
I wouldn't be allowed on a jury.
Yeah. Well, usually I get kicked off too. So as we go forward, we will do some, I'll hopefully get a little more sophisticated with this. Things are kind of screwed up because we had the week off and now we're going to have another week off, but I'll be working because spring break is next week. And my understanding is they're still doing spring break. So, but if you want to talk to me or you have questions or want to go over anything, feel free to send me an email. Or if you want to talk to me face to face, at least through Zoom, you can send me an email and tell me you'd like to talk to me over Zoom and we can set something up too. Because right now, oh, we lost somebody. We're down to 11. So anyway, and again, my internet connection at school is much better than my internet connection. There's Josh. How you doing?
I'm all right. Figured out the camera thing.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to do all that stuff too. So, plus I got, I think, somewhere. Oh yeah. So.
Nice.
So if you like me better that way.
That's art.
Yeah. So let's see if we can get rid of that. What did I do? Oh yeah. So I do have a document camera.
There you go.
But, so hopefully I'll figure out how to use this too. So I'll turn it off for now though. Maybe. Oh,
Um, I think it's on our end, isn't it? Is it on our end?
no, that's, I can share that with you.
Uh,
So, like I said, we can, I thought what we're trying to do today is just get people used to Zoom. And the fact that, yes, there is a way for us to communicate, and then hopefully, like I said, we'll get better at it as we go. That's both you and I. But we'll do a quick review of what we have been talking about. Next week, I'll be working all week anyway to try and get things organized and hopefully more or less up to speed. If you have any questions or want to go over anything, please send me some info. So, and anybody have any questions? No?
For now.
Okay. All righty. Well, I think we'll do a quick review of what we were doing on chapter 4. As I said, next week we have the spring break, but I'm hoping to get a few things posted and put together, homework to go over. I've got some stuff I need to grade and get back to you, so I will try and do that. For future meetings, I'll also try and put together an agenda so that you can kind of follow along, make sure that we're covering what you need to cover. And then if you want something added to the agenda, you can send it back to me and let me know what's going on with the agenda. So I think I can do, yeah, so very nice. So I can share the screen. We can go over and look at what we were looking at, which was critical path, chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a pretty long chapter, as I remember. So we talked about this already. Scheduling techniques using displays. We went over this hunting trip example, I think.
Mhm.
So, you know, where we had 3 people in the book, they talk about somebody was assigned to get the food, somebody was assigned to get the hunting gear, and somebody had to get the Jeep ready. So each one of these took some different amount of time, plus the go hunting, but this person get the food, had some float because their activity didn't take as long as getting the Jeep ready, and the same with getting the hunting gear. So this person had some float, but not as much float. So they just showed. So there wasn't a constraint on the way they described it on when they started. They just all wanted to be leaving at this preordained time, which is supposed to be 12, as I remember. And so that's what that little picture was about. This is a bar chart, though, not a critical path method analogy. So we talked about the steps to putting a schedule together. So anybody have any questions on this? So the key thing is breaking the project down into enough pieces that you can control and manage it. You know, we have some activities are really simple. Sometimes we roll them into other things. A little bit depends on whether you're doing them in-house with your own workforce or whether you're having a subcontractor do it. Any questions on work breakdown structure? Yay, nay? You can shake your head. You can tell me to bug off. So, but WBS, work breakdown structure, we talked a little bit about coding. And if you work for a particular company, they probably have a specific method of breaking the jobs down and coding things because they, if it's a big company, they'll have software and rather than doing it the way you want to, you have to do it the way the software does it, just like Zoom. So we're pretty much stuck with doing things the way Zoom has organized things. And incidentally, have any of you been on the Zoom website?
Nope.
Okay, so you can get a free account for similar to Facebook. You have some limits. I think I can go up through the school to up to 300 people in a meeting. I think you can do up to, I think 49 people in a meeting. So if you want to talk to your family or talk to friends or throw a party these days, you got to stay 6 feet away from everybody. But
That's a good one.
so, you know, so I'll be interested to see how dancing evolves 6 feet away from everybody, but we'll see how that happens. But if you are interested, you can go to, I think, zoom.us, and you can set up your own account if you wanted to utilize this. So, and some businesses are utilizing this too. So feel free. Activity descriptions, the different types. So we said a task is the same as an activity. So we break the job down into either activities or tasks that are required to provide the project deliverables. A milestone is a snapshot in time. It's just a point. So doesn't use resource. So start is a milestone. Frame. Top out is a milestone. Finish is a milestone. They talk about these hammocks, and I think I put some stuff in here. Have I sent this one to you? This particular slideshow?
I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
Okay, I will make sure that this gets posted to Canvas. And then if you want it separately, just let me know and I will make a copy of the slides and email it out to you. So this business on the hammock I pulled out of Wikipedia. And so this is usually like also called a roll-up task or roll-up activity, where for starting, you might have things like mobilization, signing the contract, setting up your files, a bunch of other things, which might be your initial startup. And rather than showing each one of those individual tasks, you might want to show it as a hammock. And then if you're using a computer program, when you click on a hammock, you can roll it out and break it down into subtasks. So I don't need to go over all that right now. So I think we talked about factors to be considered in defining the activities. And I don't know if anybody had any questions on any of these. Sometimes we'll define it by the nature of the work or subcontractors. Could be one. Homogeneity is talking about, if things are, activities are similar, you might want to lump those together. On a larger building, you might schedule by location. If you're going to start digging, you might start at the northwest corner, for example, and do the north wall. Then go over to the, if you're going to go east, go over to the east wall, move south, completing the east wall, then start on the south wall, and then back. So if they're of sizable duration, then you may want to do it by location. You could do it by floor. You could do it by segment. So I just got a message that my internet connection is unstable. So Size, you might do it by duration, timing, chronology, level of confidence in the duration. At some point, we will talk about PERT, where there's a formula that they typically use to determine what the most likely duration is. So typically, you'll look at the longest you think it might take under the worst conditions, the shortest it might take under the best conditions, and then what you think it should probably take, and you weight the probable a little extra. You divide it by the 6 typically to come up with an average duration, but I'll put something together and send that to you. We use the same method in quantity surveying for cross sections, where we'll take the ends and one in the middle, we'll weight the one in the middle higher. I've seen that Golden Gate Bridge before. So we can also do it by phase. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. If you're doing a rest home, for example, a lot of times they'll build that in sections or on a tract. You might have it, each house might be considered to be a separate phase or a separate little piece of the entire project. So you can break it up that way. Are you okay there? So, activity? Any questions on the definition? It's just a basic unit of work as part of the total project that's easily measured and controlled. So the key there is what? Anybody have an idea? Easily. So this is important too in a contract. If you're bidding, you need a measurement and a payment clause. How are we going to measure the work that's in place? And then how are we going to get paid based on that measurement? Percent complete is a lot more complicated because the contractor may tell you it's 75% complete. You may look at it, think it's only 50% complete. And there may not be a good, easy way of determining what that percentage is. If you're doing pipe, for example, though, and you're paying by the lineal foot, that's pretty easy. You measure how much pipe has been installed. You have a price per lineal foot, and then that becomes how you're going to get paid. I know previously we had a question on this FRP, which is related to the thing above, formwork plus rebar plus concrete plus finish. And so FRP stands for form, reinforce, and pour. Events and milestones. We've talked about what a milestone is. So my milestones when I was in construction were payday as a worker. So that was always my milestone, because all I was waiting for was to get that check. But usually, most projects you'll have certain milestones. So everybody remember what NTP is?
Negative.
What's NTP? Anybody?
Notice to proceed.
Notice to proceed. Thank you.
Notice to
So-
proceed. Good call.
So the notice to proceed. So, excellent. So the and that's usually issued, once typically when you sign a contract, it gets awarded, but before they award the contract, they usually have to verify that you've got the right insurance, and that the insurance is good, that you've got the bonds in place, that you've got a whole bunch of other things that are required before you can be accepted. once all of that is put together, then usually whoever's going to be issuing the checks will issue a notice to proceed or a notice to start. Contractually, usually you have, I don't know, usually a week to 2 weeks after you receive that notice to proceed before you're actually supposed to start, or you may have a specific start date written in the notice to proceed. Activities are all going to have a start date and a finish date. The event or milestone has a start date or a finish date. So normally we say start something or end something. That's a snapshot in time. We looked a little bit at the work breakdown structure. So level 0, which is the top, this says we're going to build an office building. Can I make this bigger? I don't see my bigger thing, but that's okay. Anybody, if you're looking at this on a phone, you probably can't see too much. So, but most of you I know are watching it on your 219-inch smart TV.
92.
Level 1, you can see that they have gone from one activity or one item to 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 items. And then they have taken one of those items. So that's level 1, this second level down. Below that, all they've done is taken that building shell and they've broken the building shell down into columns, shear walls, elevated slabs. What, I can't even read that one. Oh, beams and columns, or yeah, beams and girders. And then CIP is cast in place. So they have then taken a single item, which is this elevated slabs, and they've broken it down into some sub-tasks or sub-activities. And then for level 4, they have taken just this one, this post-tension slabs, and broken it down into 4 different things. And then they've taken one element out of false work, and they have broken it down into 4 additional things. Now these are down at level 5. Probably if you've subcontracted all this work out, you may decide to stop up here at level 3. The subcontractor though, they're the ones that will need to, if they're actually doing the work, break this down into more detail in order for them to effectively manage the job. So normally our job is to manage the subcontractor if we're the project manager, and we're just saying, what are you going to do? When are you going to do it? Are you on schedule or are you off schedule? So, this is a little bigger picture. Oh, we've covered this. CSI master format. I have not sent that out, but I will post that and send a copy out to you. There's about 186 pages of these numbers. So 03 is concrete. 03, 10, 00, that's concrete forming and accessories. And then they have further broken that down into, for this concrete forming, into some additional things. This was just a little graphic saying like it's overwhelming very quickly, because depending on the level, the number of activities up here is 1, and by the time we get down to here, we have 4,000 or 9,000 different activities that this thing has blossomed into. And again, usually as a project manager, superintendent, you're not getting into that kind of detail, but your foreman may, if they're directing a crew. So anybody have questions on this particular?
No.
No, so we covered this. Sorry to cover it again. I think this is the 3rd time we've actually covered it, but since we're starting over again. Again, in order to be 100% confident about how things are going, we usually need to be done. So we have to get a reasonable confidence level, and then we don't want any more detail because we need to get going. So sometimes that bites us in the butt. Sometimes it, works out just fine. Most of the time it works out okay. But here they're going, and again, this is going to vary for the job. You might stop, you might be at this point over here. This curve could go up and over. I don't know if I can annotate, right? This curve could be like that, in which case you would probably stop, over in here somewhere. So, but again, the project manager and the superintendent have to make that decision. I think I can. There, clear that off. So. No, I need to get rid of that now. Okay. Does that make it easier to see where the cursor is?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So, we went over this in terms of estimating the activity duration. We're just looking at the quantity of work divided by the productivity, and that should give us the time. So quantity, this one, they're doing everything in meters. So I don't know if this is either overseas job or a federal government job. I believe the federal government is doing everything in metric these days. But everybody else in California is doing it using, this would be cubic yards rather than cubic meters. So, things that you'd be looking at would be multiple crews and multiple shifts and productivity adjustment factors. Generally, if you're working at night, you're not going to get the same productivity that you get during the day. You may also have in a company, you may have 2 or 3 different crews. Or do you think all 3, if you had 3 crews, do you think all 3 crews would have the same level of productivity?
Nope.
No. So then you have to look at, put in an adjustment. So one crew might be your A crew, your B crew, your C crew. And then you might also have a, we hope we don't have to use these guys' crew. So, but when if you're working more than one shift a day or more than one crew, you have to look at how that's going to factor into your time. You might also be starting a job where your best crew is tied up on another job until partway through the job you're working on, and so you might have expect a shift in productivity partway through the task. So you'd have to look at that too. They do have a little warning here, where they say, don't talk yourself into believing that things are going to be better than they are.
They never are.
They never are. And as we found out with this coronavirus, I've been talking about this for 50 years that I know of, and it's finally here. So. The good news is most of you are pretty young, so you're not at much risk.
Mm-hmm.
Long term. However, they told me I was MFD, marked for death. So we'll see how all that works out. And then you got to put your calendar together too. So normally we're doing, a 5-day-a-week calendar, not working Saturday or Sunday. You might be working Saturdays. Normally you need special permission, at least in California, to work on Sundays. Typical working hours are 7 to 7. If you're working at night, you usually have to get a permit if you're working beyond 7. But, you know, if you look at most Caltrans work, is done at night on the freeways because of the traffic, although as long as this coronavirus thing is going on, my guess is they can shut down 1 or 2 lanes during the day, get their work done because the traffic has been very nice. So, has anybody been out driving?
I was.
Okay.
Every day.
Stay 6 feet away from all the other cars?
No,
No. So,
I don't
but
care.
yeah, the
They,
traffic.
they say 40 to 80% of us are all going to get this thing. So it's
Yeah,
just,
eventually. What they're trying to do is buy time so that hopefully by the time a large portion of the population comes down with it, again, most people, it'll just be similar to a cold or flu. But for a fairly large number of people, they're going to need hospital care, and they're trying to get the ventilators and all the other things in place so that hopefully they can treat them rather than going, you don't look like you're going to make it, so we're not going to work on you today. But we'll see.
did you breathe in a lot of asbestos in your days or what?
A fair amount, not too much, but you know, I used to do construction demo. So if you're
Yeah.
doing construction demo, there was you know, asbestos in the drywall and in the plaster and in the ceilings. And originally we ignored all of that, and we usually didn't wear a mask, and now we don't do it that way. So,
No.
but so far, so good. So we talked a little bit about the logic relationships, lags and leads. So logic, hard logic versus soft logic, and impose constraints. So these are things like, you know, you have to have certain things ready contractually. A finish date is a constraint. A start date is a constraint. You know, you might have a long lead time, or if the contractor is responsible for getting a permit. I don't know. Has anybody here ever gotten a permit?
Yeah.
Do you
Multiple.
usually get it when you wanted it?
No.
No. So if it's built into the contract that the contractor is responsible for the permit, sometimes there are problems because it takes longer to get the permit than anybody anticipated. So.
And that's when that comes in. Like if you're missing days, that's when you're getting fined every day.
Could be if you have LDs, liquidated damages, if they kick in at the end because you can't start on time, or if you had a firm start date built into your contract, you know, technically you might be in breach of contract if you're responsible for getting the permits and it takes you longer to get them than you should. So, you know, it'll cause you some grief with the owner, or you might go back and talk to the owner, and the owner, if they want, can give you some extra contract time. But as a contract manager, what I would be trying to do is, if it's taking longer to get the permit, go to the owner, say we need a change order for a contract extension due to the delay beyond our control at the building department.
And as you said before, like in San Diego, I live in Orange County, but like as they said, like I've noticed a lot of these jobs, some of these jobs will get shut down by like groups because of an animal or a plant or whatever. So
Yep.
those are things that you need to be aware of completely.
Well,
Like,
they're not something that you're completely aware of. Normally, though, you know, that would be a change condition in the contract, maybe, if you hadn't been alerted to it. Now, if you were responsible for compliance with all the environmental laws, you know, again, that might become a dispute at some point. But, you know, we had jobs where, you know, we'll start the job and some gnat catchers would fly in and set up a nest And all of a sudden the job has to stop because they don't want to disturb breeding birds, for example. Although on the job I worked on, the birds decided to set up their nests on the construction side of the sound wall that was supposed to keep them from being disturbed. So, and those can be pretty expensive. When we were working on, it'll come to me later, but one of the projects down in Rancho San Diego, we had to build a $250,000 plywood wall to satisfy the environmental constraints. And like I said, I don't think it had any real impact, but that was a requirement for the job. We also had people that don't like the project, if they can find some reason to turn you in for stormwater, for endangered plants, endangered species, they'll do that. So again, you have to go look at your contract and see what it says. When they were building Legoland, the sheriff actually caught people who had gone out and captured endangered animals, and they had them in cages and were going to release them the day the biologists were supposed to come out and do the survey. So the animals were not from the Legoland site, but they didn't want the project to go forward. So they went and caught the animals and were going to release them so that they would be found and slow the project down. So stuff happens. Yes, it does. So our relationships, we've talked about finish to start, start to start, finish to finish. There's one other one, but it's not used very often. Lags and leads, and I think we talk a little bit about those. But the imposed constraints. So when we were closing the San Marcos landfill, when I was with the county, one of the things we needed oversight and review during the landfill closing from Environmental Health Department. And there was a piece of equipment that was required, something called a BAT, which was a Bjorn Atkinson, Torgerson, something or other. It was a permeability device is what it was. And we had to be testing the soil to make sure that it wasn't too porous because they were using it to cap the landfill. So when you build a landfill, the landfill is built kind of like a big Tupperware bowl. You put a double liner in the bottom. You push the trash into the Tupperware bowl or into the liner, and then you cap it with a lid. And the lid has to be designed in such a way that it doesn't allow water to percolate down through the landfill. So anyway, they needed this device to test the material to make sure it met specification. And somebody misread what it was, and so the health department came out and wanted to know where their testing device was, and it took them, I think, 6 weeks to get it because the only one that they could find was in Sweden. That was an imposed constraint that caused some problems. Drawing the network diagram, we've kind of done through that. You may run a schedule and it may look fine. Sorry, I had a large bug flying by. But typically you'll have an imposed finish date or some sort of so many working days that you have to be completed by. If the contract allows you enough time, it's not a problem. If the contract time is too aggressive, then you may have some problems. Non-work days, we have holidays, and we've had something new because with this coronavirus, a lot of work has either come to a complete standstill or has slowed way down because I'm not sure how you pass off material from one person to another. without getting closer than 6 feet.
My father owns a concrete company up in Seattle, and they're not stopping.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they're-
yeah, some of those are considered to be essential services.
oh, okay, gotcha.
But on some jobs, what I would imagine they would do is have one person pick up the material, put it down, move away, let the other person come over and then pick it up, rather than just having a straight handoff from person to person.
Construction workers don't care, I don't think.
Well, normally they don't, but again, on some jobs, the contractor's responsible for safety. And if you're working for the government, my guess is the government is going to have much stricter workplace rules, and you may have a safety officer that you have to deal with. If it's a non-union, probably all bets are off. So, just as here locally, the San Diego Police was down at the beach trying to break up crowds because everybody wanted to go down to the beach and have a good
We're losing you, Larry.
Now, if you're using some, you have to follow the rules of the software. So the software does not always do what you would like it to. Looks like my internet was unstable again. When you're done with your draft schedule, then you have to look it over. It's always a good idea to have somebody else take a peek at it and try and get things squared away. You don't want to have errors or loops. So a loop is where A comes before B and B comes before A. That's a logic problem in a computer software program. If you put in logic that says A comes before B and B comes before A, you're going to get a message usually that says, you can't do that. You need to figure it out. You need to figure out what the correct logic is. Omissions, if you leave stuff out, it's just like dominoes. It may affect the whole schedule. So, and then redundancies is where sometimes you count the same thing twice, 3 times, or we have more relationships than we actually need. We might have A comes before B that comes before C, and we might have A comes before C, but that would be a redundant statement because we've already taken care of that with A comes before B comes before C. We don't need another statement that says A comes before C. And again, when you're looking at the schedule, it's usually a good idea to have the people that are actually going to do the work take a quick look at it and see if it makes sense. Because, again, most construction managers, are they experts in all fields of construction?
Nope.
No, I don't think so. So they put things together, even the superintendent, so they may have pretty broad-based experience, but they don't know all the ins and outs. They're not paying attention to what's going on in the labor market or in supply chains, and right now supply chains are disrupted too. So have them take a look at it, and hopefully they'll pick out the problems with your schedule. And I think we went over this a little bit. The hard part is taking your draft, your schedule, your baseline, and then turning it into action or turning it into a management tool. So you'd like it not to be just a pretty picture or an ugly picture, depending on the case. So, and they're telling you you're going to have to make some decisions. For each activity, including those with float, you normally want to have a specific start date and a specific finish date. So you have to figure out where you want that to start and finish to occur, if there is some leeway in that. And that's because if you tell people, well, it could be here or it could be there, they're normally going to wait till the last minute. That may not be what you as a manager want. You need to identify, what the roles and responsibilities of all of the people that you're supposed to oversee. And then you also need commitment from your management. So if you're the superintendent, you're the project manager, if you're talking to the subs or you're talking to your work crew and they go, you're full of it, I'm going to go back, talk to your boss. And if your boss then allows them to do something else, you don't have any real authority on the job, and they'll keep going to your boss, or they'll keep going to whoever will give them the answer that they want. And so it's important that your management, your bosses, provide you with the support. So that's one thing I used to tell my testers that work out in the field. So they go out and check compaction, or they'll go out and check nailing. And I said, your job is not to make the decision on whether it's okay or not okay. You look at it, you know what's there, you give that information to your project manager or superintendent, and they're the ones that are supposed to be making the decision. So it's not your job to tell them if they pass or don't pass, unless that authority has been delegated to you by the project manager or superintendent.
This is my class.
I hear somebody.
Oh, sorry, it's me, Patty.
You can, hi Patty, you can mute your mic.
No, I just did.
Okay, I can still hear you though. That's okay. So anyway, monitoring, controlling. So that means you have your baseline. You're going to check your schedule. You're either on schedule or off schedule. You're either on budget or off budget. Normally, if everything's okay, you don't have to do too terribly much. But if you're behind, you need to take action. You need to take action as quickly as possible. And you need to talk to make sure that everybody that's impacted is in on the discussion. So this is a big problem where you're just talking to one or two people, and what's going on may impact a bunch of subs in other trades as well as the one you're dealing with directly. Normally, as part of your contract, you have reporting and documentation requirements, and you need to take care of those. So somebody is going to be looking for that documentation, and these days, particularly when the lawsuits show up or when the claims start, you need a lot of paperwork. So most of us tend to put that off until the end, because most of us got in construction because we like to build stuff. We like to do physical things. We don't like to do a bunch of paperwork. However, you're going to be in a severe disadvantage in a dispute if you aren't familiar with the contract and haven't kept your paperwork current. If you have changes, and again, you need to maintain a change log and a change control process, and make sure that if there is a change, that everybody who needs to know is aware of it, and that change gets implemented the way it's supposed to be. All right, you're supposed to move a window to a different wall. Well, if the window gets framed up, or the window opening gets framed up in the original location, even though the installer's been notified that there's going to be a different window or a different location, you need to make sure that the other people that are involved in that process are made aware of what's going on, so you don't have additional problems. Maybe I will go find a beer.
A Corona?
Maybe, no, I think I have, what do I have here? I think I have Stella here.
Oh, nice. We should just meet.
Yes. So, well, I can send you one.
They're only interested
Don't
in
worry, I
good
have plenty.
Yeah, okay, good. Anyway, database revisions and feedback, so all of that stuff. Documentation, organization. Normally you have a project manual. That manual should be put together before the start of the job. That's part of the pre-planning. If the job is going to be audited, in particular, you want to make sure that you have the documentation organized in a format that's consistent with the audit that you're expecting. Archiving, how are you going to store this stuff? And so that's a problem I had. Friday, they told me originally on Thursday morning at school, last Thursday morning, they told me I could be at school until 5 o'clock. I came in at noon and there was a sign on the computer that said, you need to be out of here by 11. So, and there was somebody out watching, so I had to load everything. I could just grab what I could in about 15 minutes and leave. So there's a few things that did not get packed up that I would have liked to have packed up with me. But archiving and having access to those archives is an important function. Yeah. Accessibility and confidentiality. So a lot of what you're doing is confidential in nature. If you're building a warehouse for an electronics company, you know, how the plant is going to be set up, how the equipment lines are going to be set up. Those are considered to be trade secrets typically, and you have an obligation where there is confidential information involved to make sure that that's taken care of. Gesundheit.
Thank you.
Also, you know, the personnel actions, you know, if somebody's sick, there are usually questions you can ask and you can't ask, and you're not supposed to be telling people that, you know, so-and-so is out with the coronavirus, or so-and-so is out with, you know, having a sex change operation or something of that nature, because those are considered to be, you know, a person's medical status is considered to be confidential. So, and these days, you know, there's a whole range of things that you may be dealing with. Optional steps, we talked a little bit. You can, once you have the base schedule, you can cost load the schedule and you can kind of look at what your spending curve, or what they refer to as the burn rate is. You can also look at how you're expecting to get your money, because normally you have to do the work first. You collect your money after the work is done. So typically there is a lag between you spending money and getting money in, and that's something you have to plan for. Resource loading here, when they're talking about resources, we've got materials, we've got people, and we've got equipment. So the common problem is with cranes. Everybody wants to use the crane at the same time. You have one backhoe out on the job, you need 3 backhoes on a particular day based on your schedule. You might try, and you either got to bring in additional backhoes to keep the work going, or reschedule some of the activities so that you're not overloading the resources that are available. Resource leveling, that's just where we have peaks and valleys, and we'll, I think, talk about that a little more later in the class. So rather than have those peaks and valleys, we would like to keep things nice and even. So if you're hiring laborers, for example, bringing them in, it's hard to keep people interested or get good work if you need one day, you need 10 the next day, you need 2 the next day, you need 4 the next day, because people like a little predictability. It'd be much better if your average number of workers is 5 or 6, to try and start off at a median level and try and spread that out evenly as much as you can. Particularly, you would like to have most of the people, I think, working toward the beginning or the middle, and then when you don't need that many laborers, start tapering them off one at a time. Is usually a much better morale issue. than having this up, down, up, down, up, down. Also, it makes it look like you can't really plan a job very well when you have big peaks and valleys. Cash flow analysis, usually not only are you looking at income and outgo, but you're looking at where you are and what you're going to need for the next month. So again, it depends on how your budget is set up and how you're getting paid. You might be getting paid on percent complete. You might be paid on a per unit cost. You might have a schedule of draws, and depending on your contract and how you're getting paid, you may also want to reschedule portions of the job. And then procurement is always a problem. How do I get the stuff we need, when we need it, where we need it, to who we need it? And we will look at how we enter that into the schedule. When we first do the schedule, normally what we do is we assume we've got all the people we want, we've got all the resources we want, and put a schedule together from there. Once we have that base schedule, we go back and start looking at procurement and equipment needs, people needs, and seeing how that's going to impact or cause us to revise that schedule. So any questions on any of that? Happy days. So I think we've covered this. Why assigning resources is better than assigning a budget. Because normally we're trying to build a job. So while financial management, or while the budget is part of that management, what we're really trying to do is get the thing built. It's usually easier to change and update or it may not be easy to change and update the cost of an activity in real time. We are looking at trying to integrate with accounting and procurement. If you're using a software program like Primavera, then you can do a whole bunch of things with those. What I normally find in smaller companies is they only use maybe 5% of their project management software capability, because it takes a fair amount of time to learn the software. And if you get really good at working the software, what normally happens?
Make more money.
Well, not only do you make more money, but usually you leave the company that trained you and go somewhere else.
Somewhere better.
Yeah. Let's see. I see somebody found the annotation tool. So, I don't
That
think
was me.
That was you? Excellent. You did an
I
excellent
was
job.
playing around with it.
Okay, well, feel free. You can play around with it. As the host, I have more control than you folks do. They even have a kick everybody out of the meeting thing button here. So, but
I wouldn't
we don't-
mind.
Yeah, well, learn how to use it. So, I mean, this is what we're going to be doing for a while. So you might
Are
as
you
well.
gonna email us this, what you're teaching us right now?
Yes.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I am. So, like I said, I will email it. I will also post it to Canvas. So Kevin, you're looking a little dark, or Mark is looking a little dark. I can't see Kevin at all. So, oh, there you are. How you doing?
Good.
He wanted to keep it that way.
Yeah, no, I'm just checking. I'm just checking. So
I'm alive.
I'm glad to hear that. So anyway, and then sometimes we're using resource-driven activities. So those are things where we're actually limited by the resource that's available. So if you need a crane to move stuff up on a high rise, for example, you can't do your activity unless you have the crane as an available resource to do that work. Everything will shut down. So project schedule versus the construction schedule. So things that you could include in the schedule, you know, design review, construction. So we've talked about all of these things. So what else is there? Anything of interest? No, but owner's activity. So this is a lot of times where the owner will have something built in the contract where they're going to do something. And so often that becomes a problem because you need to schedule with them. They also need some sort of control put on them by the project manager, the superintendent. This happens a lot with residential contracts where the owner's going to pick the appliances or pick the cabinets. And so if they can't do it in a timely manner, it will delay the job. And usually what happens is they're busy watching the do-it-to-yourself network, and they keep changing their mind over what they want, or what they want they can't afford. So usually, I'm waiting for, there we go. So usually what happens is you have to say decisions have to be made by a certain date. If you delay the activity that is supposed to follow that selection of appliances, that selection of cabinets, there are penalties that will need to be paid, or you need to allow for more time in the contract, or whatever else seems appropriate for the contract. And vendors. So again, you may be renting equipment, you may have an equipment yard. Big companies usually run their equipment as a separate vendor. So a big company will have their construction crew, but they'll have an equipment supplier within the company. And that's a separate branch, and they charge the rest of the company for the use of that equipment. And so that's something else that you may need to track or work into your schedule. And then other agency activities they have here, like say government, test labs. So, you know, usually on a construction schedule, certain things can't start until inspection has been performed and passed. If you're doing concrete testing or you have special inspectors, their reports have to come in and be approved before you can move forward. So this is often a problem where the work gets ahead of the inspection or the review. So, and this happens a lot in particularly residential projects. A lot of times people will be waiting for a permit, and they'll go ahead and you know, dig the foundations, because you don't need a permit normally to dig the foundation, dig a hole in your yard. You do need some stormwater stuff put out there because that's separate environmental law. And then they're waiting for the inspector to the permit to be issued so they can call for inspection and get approval to pour concrete. In the meantime, if it sits too long, it's been raining a bit here, their footings may get 2 or 3 times larger than they had anticipated, because each time it rains, they may have to hog them out and start reforming. So I think we went over some of these things. So, right, everybody remember how to do the forward pass?
Yep.
Yep. So, and again, we don't have a start milestone, we don't have an end milestone, but if you look just today, the one in the upper left-hand corner is the early start date, upper right-hand corner is the early finish date, lower left-hand corner is late start date, lower right-hand corner is late finish date. So early start is 0. The early finish is 0 plus the duration. So the number in the box is the duration. So 0 plus 5 gives us the early start. And so I think you have some homework related to this. I did tell you on that homework, to ignore the ones that were activity on the arrow, because I don't think anybody uses that. So you can put it in a tabular form, which sometimes is good to know. You can look at the activities, and you can actually have if you do this in Excel, which is what typically they'll do, then you can have the activities sorted by early start date. So even though they may not fall A, B, C, D through the schedule, you can just say sort early start date, and it will scramble all these so that the early start date is chronological. Now, in this particular one, right, we can see that here D and E are on day 13 and F is on day 11. So if you're the project manager and you wanted to see these in strict chronological order, you could do a sort here, and it would move 11 up to just below, move F just below C, and then you would have these listed in chronological order of the early start date. You can do the same thing with early finish or late finish. And so those are our tools that the project manager can use. And so many people, that's all they're doing, is they're using these tabular solutions as opposed to the start diagram. Is everybody doing okay?
Yep.
You're kind of awake?
Kind of.
Yes.
Kind of. Okay, well, you know, we're just starting out. Like I say, you get another week off, so happy days.
Larry, question. Are you going to send us the homework or how's that going to work?
Yep, I will be posting to Canvas, and I will be emailing. And not all the emails are going through, because some of you, when I emailed, your email was kicked back. For
I'd
some
rather get
reason.
it in, I've been getting your emails. I'd rather get
Okay.
it through email because I'm having a hard time in the campus thing.
Yeah, I will send it both ways, and you're not the only one that has a hard time in Canvas, because it's all new to me too. So,
Perfect. Thank you.
so we will, you're welcome. So we'll send it out both ways. So and you can see that snappy background I have, but you know, I'm actually out here in a trash dump somewhere. So we sorted that out. But if you want to use, like I said, many places, people are just using these tabular forms of the schedule rather than looking at the network diagram. So critical path, longest continuous path in a network from start to finish. So he doesn't like to use the path where you have zero float, because in some cases, if the job drop dead date is much longer or extends beyond where the job ending date could be, then you would have float all the way through the schedule. But it's the longest path through the schedule. So if your finish date and your contract date coincide, then it will be the string of tasks that have zero float. So. Forward pass, I think we did. And the thing to remember is we're calculating early start, early finish, and expected duration or expected finish for the job. Backward pass, process of going from the finish to start. We're calculating late start, late finish dates for each activities, and then we can identify the float from that also. So if we start at 0, go forward, we should get to the end date. If we then go backward, we should get back to 0. If you have a constraint, so if you have to finish before your schedule says you should be done, you can plug that in at the end, and then you'll wind up with negative float, which means you got problems. predecessor activity, successor activity. So when we write the logic, we can write it both ways. We can say certain things come before, certain things come after. You feed that into a computer, or you review the logic yourself. You can then figure out how to sequence the task in order to come up with a schedule. So this nomenclature, what I would do is I would keep a sheet of paper with this stuff. So when you're going through these, the book, or you're going through some of these diagrams, you have that to refer to. And I'll put something together and send that out too. So this thing right here, this is what you should make a copy of, or I'll send you a separate copy of, because this is the language or what the book uses. It's a little cold in my room here, so you'll have to pardon me. So here's the box. This ABC is the activity. The duration is self-explanatory. Upper left, early start. Upper right, early finish. Lower left, lower start. Lower right, late finish. Late start. And then this is the math if you want to do the math. So total float is the late start minus the early start, or the late finish minus the early finish should give you the same total float. You can also use this one, late finish minus early start minus the duration will also, all three of them will give you the same answer.
Hey, Larry, in all honesty, are we going to even be using this stuff in the real world?
Yes.
Yes,
Really?
Yeah.
you will.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, not if you don't want to do this. If you don't want to be dealing with the schedule,
Yeah.
right? So normally what's going to happen is the scheduler who operates, if you're using software, the scheduler will put this together. What you're normally asking the scheduler is, tell me what you've put together, what you've got. And you're going to be consulting this, though, so that you can figure out how to manage the project more efficiently, how to communicate with your subs and your workers more effectively. And so you can know how excited to get. If you have no float and something is on the being delayed, your job's going to stretch out. If something has float and you slip a day or two, and you don't go beyond the allotted float that's available, then you don't have to worry too much. But that's what you're concerned with.
Yeah.
And then if there's a change, so you thought the duration, right? You thought this was going to be 12 days. So the sub starts and talks to your superintendent and tells the super, we made a little mistake. We got the coronavirus. We've only got half the workers available. Instead of 10 days, it's now going to take 20 days. That's beyond our control. And while you may say, well, you've got a contractual obligation, well, that's great, but sometimes you just can't find the bodies. You can't do the work. So my son, who's up in Portland, sheet metal worker, is telling me that's what's happening on some of the jobs now. Is they, half the people have gone home, particularly the older workers, because they don't want to be exposed. They don't want to take a chance. So. And certain jobs are considered to be essential. So if you're working on a hospital, that's normally considered to be essential, and that may go forward. And other jobs may be considered to be non-essential, and so they may pull people off, where those jobs may be put on hold. Float. I know we had some questions on float. So total float, they got free float, independent float, interfering float. Normally, we're more concerned with the free float independent float is float that if you use it up for an activity, it won't affect the job after it. So most float is shared float between a number of activities, whereas independent float only belongs to one particular activity. And so I think they have a picture here. We don't need to look at the calculations right now. And so here's the free float. So for this particular activity, they're looking at B, and this is the following activity, and this is a following activity. And so here you can see this one has an early start at 8. So if we delay this one, this job is going to get pushed downstream. For this one here, though, right, we've got an early start of 12. So we could wait 4 days before we start that. That one doesn't have to start at 8. It could start at 12. So that's got a little float with respect to this job. And so here's the math for that. The ESI plus 1. So this is normally the predecessor is considered I. The follower is the J or the plus 1. So if we look at B, free float for B, it's the early start of this one here. Oh, this is, I can't read that anyway, but EFI, so that's the previous one. So it's this 8 minus 12. So it's the minimum of the two. Minus 8 gives us 0. So the free float, they say, is always less than the total float. And we'll have to go through a couple of actual homework problems to get that figured out. And we're almost done. I'm going to take us till about 8, and which is almost right around the corner. So I will talk a little bit, but I'm willing to stay. So if you want to go over anything or you want to talk about anything after 8 o'clock, I'll be available for that for however long you want. Because that's when I'm on the clock. So, now, trying to get all this crazy stuff set up. Like I said, if you're interested, again, for if anybody came in late, you can go to the zoom.us and you can set up your own Zoom account, and they have a bunch of tutorials and a bunch of other things. If you're looking to log on to some support or tutorial activity, I think the school has been sending out emails regarding that. But if you're interested in something in particular, let me know and we'll send it. So we don't care about all of that. So here you can see where we don't have any float. One of the things you'd be looking at, and you can ask usually in Excel, it can flag certain values by a different color. And so these are critical activities. And you need to pay more attention to them than the non-critical activities that have float. However, if you use up all the float, you now have a critical activity. So. Yeah, independent. So this is independent float. It's not affected by stuff before or stuff after. You just have a certain ball of float. And again, there's some examples of that in your book. interfering float. Again, if you have questions on that, let me know. Constraint, so we just have an externally imposed restriction affecting when an activity can start or finish. So if I need crane to lift materials to the roof, I can't start my activity until the crane is there and set up. So usually you need a permit, you need an inspection, you need a bunch of other things. And if that is late, then we can't start the activity that's dependent on the crane if the crane is late. If we need to start framing on a certain day and the lumber doesn't show up until 2 days later, that activity's been delayed a couple days. So it says constraints are not alternatives for logic. What happens is we got something we got to live with. And so those are constraints. We're stuck with them. Talk a little bit about software. And so this is from Primavera P6. That's probably the biggest and most complicated one out there. A Microsoft project, much simpler. You can do a simple schedule very quickly. You can do bar charts with, what is it? I'll send a list of some software packages out to you just so you can take a look. Some of them you can download for a free trial. See if there's anything else here. We'll get to that later. Oh, I fixed all that. So I will send this out. You have questions. I hope you have a pleasant week. I will try and get everything posted or emailed out to you. Hopefully we can continue in this manner. So the goal is we're trying to get you through and get you the credit. So any questions on anything else?
No, sir.
No, thank you, Larry.
No,
No.
Thank you for trying, Larry.
Oh, yeah, well, we're working on it. So it's like I say, a little new for me, and I'm usually used to walking back and forth and doing a bunch of other things. So I don't know what some of these buttons do. So I can close this. So. Same problem I have. So
What was that?
I have no idea. So
Don't ask.
don't ask. That's right. Don't ask, and I can't see it. I'm good. So we will, and as I said, if you need a separate Zoom session or you want to talk to me this way, just let me know and we can do that individually. But I am planning on trying to get the meetings at our normal class time. If it turns out there's a better time for you guys, I will also be recording these. And so when we're
So we're in trouble?
well, maybe. But I haven't learned to use all the function. The plan is once these are recorded, they're saved, and then we can post them to YouTube or post them to Canvas or email them out if they're not too big a file. So that's what we'll try and do. I'm going to stop recording right now.